A mother leopard carried her dying cub to a vet, and the reason why broke him. At first, it looked like just another desperate act of nature, a wild predator laying its trust in human hands. But as the cub struggled for life on the cold steel table, the truth behind its suffering began to surface. What started as an act of compassion pulled the vet into a battle he never expected. Because the poison in the cub's veins wasn't an accident, and the forces behind it would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. As the mother leopard prowled outside, watching with unyielding eyes, the vet realized this wasn't just about saving an animal. It was about choosing whether to stand against a power that could destroy him. What would you do if justice meant risking everything you had left and facing the wrath of both man and beast? Before we dive in, drop your name or city in the comments. It reminds me that behind every view is a real heartbeat. The evening sun cast long shadows through the windows of the Mountain Valley Veterinary Clinic, where Dr. Wesley Crane sat alone in his office, absently turning an old leather collar between his weathered hands. The small brass tag still caught the light, making the name Scout glimmer in the dying daylight. Even after 30 years, he couldn't bring himself to put it away. Wesley closed his eyes, and the memories flooded back with painful clarity. He was 12 years old again, cradling his German Shepherd puppy as life slipped away. Scout's brown eyes had looked up at him with such trust, even at the end. He'd been too young, too helpless to do anything but watch and cry as the poison took hold. "I'm sorry, buddy," Wesley whispered to the empty room, his voice rough with emotion. "I should have watched you better that day." The guilt of that failure had driven him through veterinary school, through endless nights of study, through every difficult case in his 15-year career. Yet somehow, it had never felt like enough. Every animal he saved was a small redemption. But Scout's memory remained a wound that wouldn't quite heal. Wesley placed the collar carefully in his desk drawer, next to a stack of unpaid bills. His small clinic was struggling, like many businesses in rural Montana these days, but he couldn't bring himself to turn away animals in need, even when their owners couldn't pay. Some called it poor business sense. He called it keeping a promise he'd made to a puppy 3 decades ago. The last rays of sunlight painted the mountains purple against the darkening sky as Wesley began his evening routine, checking on the few overnight patients, a cat recovering from surgery, a horse with colic in the barn out back. The familiar tasks usually brought him peace, but tonight, something felt different. There was a heaviness in the air, like the stillness before a storm. A sudden noise from the front of the clinic made him freeze. It wasn't the usual sounds of the building settling or wind in the eaves. This was deliberate. A scratch, then a thud against the glass doors. Wesley's heart quickened as he moved cautiously toward the front. The motion sensor lights flickered on, illuminating the small parking area and the tree line beyond. What he saw there made him question his own sanity. A leopard stood at his clinic doors, not a mountain lion, which would have been unusual enough, but an actual leopard, massive, spotted, and utterly impossible in rural Montana. The big cat's muscles rippled beneath its scarred hide as it moved, and Wesley found himself rooted to the spot, his breath caught in his throat. Then he saw what the leopard carried, and everything else fell away. In her mouth, held with infinite gentleness, was a cub. The little one hung limp, its spotted coat dull and its breathing shallow. The mother's eyes met Wesley's across the space between them, and in that moment, he understood with crystal clarity why she had come. Those eyes held no wildness, no threat. They burned with something he recognized from his own reflection whenever he thought of Scout, desperation, fear of loss, and a parent's fierce determination to save their child. The mother leopard stepped closer to the glass, and Wesley could see the intelligence in her gaze. She was asking, no, demanding, his help. The cub in her mouth twitched weakly, and Wesley's professional eye caught signs that made his stomach clench. The shallow breathing, the limp posture, they were distressingly familiar. Poison, just like Scout. Wesley's hand moved to the door, lock of its own accord. Every rational thought screamed at him to call wildlife services, to back away, to remember that this was a wild predator, capable of killing him with frightening ease. But deeper than fear, deeper even than reason, was the echo of a 12-year-old boy's promise. Never again. His fingers closed around the lock. The mother leopard watched him, utterly still now, except for the tip of her tail, which twitched with barely contained tension. Wesley could see old scars crossing her face and shoulders. This was a survivor, a fighter. And now she was fighting for her cub's life. "Okay," he whispered, more to himself than to the leopard. "Okay." The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet evening. Wesley's heart thundered in his chest as he slowly pulled the door open, just wide enough. Time seemed to stretch like honey, thick and golden and suspended. The mother leopard moved with liquid grace, stepping past him into the clinic. Her presence filled the space, wild and regal and terrifying in its power. Yet she made no aggressive moves, focused entirely on her precious burden. With infinite care, she laid her cub at Wesley's feet. The little one couldn't have been more than a few months old. Its spotted coat rose and fell with labored breaths, and a small whimper escaped its throat. The mother leopard stepped back, just a few feet, her eyes never leaving Wesley's face. The message was clear. "Save my child." Wesley knelt slowly beside the cub, his veterinarian's training taking over despite the surreal nature of the situation. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking vital signs, looking for symptoms that could tell him what kind of poison he was dealing with. The mother leopard watched every movement, muscles coiled tight but holding herself in check. "I'll help," Wesley said softly, not sure if she could understand the words, but knowing she would understand his tone. "I promise I'll do everything I can." As he gently lifted the cub, memories of Scout overlaid the moment. Another small body, another desperate fight against poison, another promise. But this time was different. This time, he had the knowledge, the tools, and the skills to make that promise mean something. The mother leopard followed as Wesley carried her cub to the treatment room, her padded feet silent on the linoleum floor. Her presence should have terrified him, but instead, it felt almost like having a colleague watching over his shoulder, albeit a colleague who could tear him apart if he made a wrong move. Under the bright medical lights, Wesley could see the cub's condition more clearly. Its gums were pale, its pulse rapid and weak, but it was fighting, clinging to life with the same determination he saw in its mother's eyes. And this time, that determination would not stand alone. "Hold on, little one," Wesley murmured as he began his work, aware of the mother leopard's watchful presence, aware of the weight of this moment, aware that somehow, impossibly, he had been given a chance to right an old wrong. Just hold on. The mother leopard's intense gaze never wavered from Wesley as he stood frozen in the doorway. Her low, rumbling growl filled the air. Not aggressive, but desperate, pleading. She paced back and forth, her muscular body tense with anxiety. Yet she maintained a careful distance that seemed calculated not to frighten him away. Wesley's heart pounded against his ribs as memories crashed over him like waves. Scout's final moments played vividly in his mind, his beloved German shepherd. Puppy, reaching out with one trembling paw as the poison took hold. The weight of that small body in his arms, the helplessness, the guilt that had shaped his entire life since that day. "Easy there," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The mother leopard's ears twitched at the sound, but she didn't retreat. Instead, she took a single step forward, still cradling her cub with heartbreaking gentleness. Wesley's medical training warred with his survival instinct. The cub's condition was clearly critical. Its small body hung limp, breathing labored, and irregular. Every second he hesitated could mean the difference between life and death. But this was a wild predator, not a house cat. One swipe of those powerful paws could end him. The mother leopard made a sound then, not a growl, but a soft, keening noise that struck Wesley to his core. It was the universal sound of a parent watching their child suffer, transcending species. Barriers with its raw pain. Okay, he breathed. Decision made. Okay, let me help. Moving with exaggerated slowness, Wesley stepped aside and gestured toward the clinic's interior. The mother leopard's eyes tracked his movement, intelligence, burning in their amber depths. She seemed to understand his invitation, padding forward with liquid grace. Inside the clinic's familiar confines, Wesley's professional instincts began to take over. He guided the leopard toward his examination room, speaking in low, soothing tones. This way. That's it. Let me look at your little one. Under the bright medical lights, the mother leopard finally set her cub down on the examination table. The little creature looked even more fragile in the harsh illumination. Its spotted coat, dull and lifeless. Its tiny rib cage struggling with each breath. Wesley approached carefully, always keeping one eye on the mother. She backed away just enough to give him access to her cub, but remained close enough to intervene if she perceived any threat. Her tail lashed back and forth, betraying her anxiety. As he began his examination, Wesley's experienced hands picked up troubling signs. The cub's gums were pale and slightly blue-tinged. Its pupils were dilated, and its heart rate was dangerously rapid. These weren't the symptoms of natural illness or malnutrition. "Oh no," he muttered, recognition dawning. The pattern was familiar, horrifyingly familiar. The same symptoms he'd seen in Scout all those years ago. This is poison. The mother leopard's growl deepened, as if she understood the gravity of his words. Wesley's mind raced through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. Leopards weren't native to Montana. These animals shouldn't be here at all. And poison meant human involvement, deliberate human involvement. He grabbed his medical kit, hands steady now despite the danger. The mother leopard watched intently as he drew blood samples and began basic treatment procedures. Her eyes never left his hands, but she seemed to sense his intent to help, remaining still despite her obvious distress. "Someone did this to you," Wesley said softly, preparing an injection of activated charcoal. "Someone brought you here and tried to kill your baby." The thought made his blood boil. He'd seen cases of animal cruelty before, but this was different. This was calculated. The cub whimpered as Wesley administered the injection, a tiny sound that cut straight to his heart. The mother leopard tensed but held her position, seeming to understand that the momentary pain was necessary. Working quickly but carefully, Wesley set up an 4-line for fluids and additional medication. The poison's exact nature would need to be identified through blood work, but he could at least start supportive treatment. Every few moments, he glanced at the mother leopard, still amazed by her apparent trust in him. She stood like a sentinel, her powerful body coiled with tension, yet showing remarkable restraint. Her eyes held an almost human quality of understanding. She knew her cub's life hung in the balance, and she had chosen to place that life in Wesley's hands. The responsibility weighed heavily on him. This wasn't just about saving one small life anymore. Something bigger was happening here, something dark and deliberate. The presence of these magnificent creatures in Montana, the calculated use of poison, it all pointed to human trafficking in exotic animals. As he worked, Wesley's mind returned to that day with Scout. He'd been too young then, too inexperienced to save his beloved puppy. But he wasn't that helpless boy anymore. He had the knowledge now, the skills, and the determination to make a difference. The cub's breathing seemed to ease slightly as the medications began to take effect. Its small body still trembled, but the worst of the seizure-like symptoms were subsiding. The mother leopard noticed the change too. Her posture relaxed fractionally, though her vigilance never wavered. "That's it, little one," Wesley murmured, checking vital signs again. "Fight it. We're not letting you go. Not this time." The next few hours would be critical. The blood work would tell him more about what they were dealing with, but the immediate challenge was keeping the cub stable. Wesley pulled up a stool, settling in for a long night of monitoring. The mother leopard sank to her haunches nearby, her eyes fixed on her cub with fierce devotion. In the quiet of the clinic, with only the soft beep of monitoring equipment breaking the silence, Wesley felt the weight of what he'd undertaken. He'd invited wild predators into his clinic, discovered evidence of possible criminal activity, and committed himself to a course of action that could have dangerous consequences. But looking at the mother leopard's unwavering dedication, at the tiny cub fighting for its life, he knew he couldn't have chosen differently. Sometimes compassion demanded courage. Sometimes doing the right thing meant taking risks. The cub stirred slightly, its small paw twitching in a gesture that painfully echoed Scout's final moments. But this time, Wesley wasn't helpless. This time, he had a chance to change the ending of the story. Wesley crouched down beside the examination table where the leopard cub lay motionless. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone, scrolling quickly through his contacts. There was only one person he could trust with something like this: Lavra Green. She had been his friend for years and knew more about wildlife than anyone else in the county. The phone rang 3 times before Laura's voice came through, alert despite the late hour. "Wesley, what's wrong?" "Lavra, I need you at the clinic, now." His voice cracked slightly. Well, you wouldn't believe me if I told you over the phone. Just hurry." "I'm on my way," she replied without hesitation. "Give me 15 minutes. While waiting, Wesley kept a careful eye on both the cub and the glass doors where the mother leopard maintained her vigil. Her powerful form paced back and forth, muscles rippling beneath her spotted coat. Every few minutes, she would stop and press, her nose against the glass, checking on her baby. The sight made Wesley's chest tighten with emotion. The cub's breathing remained shallow and irregular. Wesley had already started basic supportive care, 4 fluids and oxygen, but he needed Laura's expertise with wildlife to be certain about the cause. His mind kept circling back to the symptoms he was seeing: the muscle tremors, the respiratory distress, the dilated pupils. They were eerily familiar. Laura's truck pulled up exactly 14 minutes later, its headlights sweeping across the parking lot. The mother leopard melted into the shadows, but didn't leave entirely. Wesley could still make out her form in the darkness. Watching Laura burst through the door, her usual practical outdoor clothing slightly rumpled from rushing out. She stopped dead in her tracks when she saw the cub. "Oh my God," she whispered, then immediately snapped into professional mode. "What are the symptoms?" Wesley listed them off rapidly as Lavra moved to examine the cub. Respiratory distress, muscle tremors, dilated pupils, excessive salivation. "Found about 40 minutes ago when the mother brought it to my door." "The mother?" Laura's head snapped up. "She's still out there," Wesley gestured toward the darkness beyond the glass. "Hasn't left since she brought the cub to me." Laura's face hardened as she continued her examination. Her fingers moved expertly over the cub's body, checking vital signs and responses. After several tense minutes, she straightened up, her expression grim. "This is poison, Wesley. No doubt about it." She ran a hand through her hair in frustration. "I've seen it before. Some ranchers around here use tainted bait to get rid of predators they consider a threat to their livestock. It's illegal, but that doesn't stop them." Wesley felt his stomach turn. "You're sure?" The symptoms are textbook strychnine poisoning. They mix it with meat and leave it out where predators will find it. Laura's voice was tight with anger. It's a horrible way to die. The mother must have found her cub in time and somehow knew to bring it here. The words hit Wesley like a physical blow. His mind flashed back to Scout again. The way his puppy had suffered, the horrible convulsions, the helpless whimpers. History was repeating itself, but this time, he had a chance to change the ending. What do we do? He asked, already moving to gather supplies. We need to start activated charcoal treatment immediately, Lava replied, rolling up her sleeves. Then supportive care, lots of fluids, anti-seizure medication, and constant monitoring. The next 24 hours will be critical. As they worked together to treat the cub, Wesley could feel the mother leopard's presence like a physical weight. She had emerged from the shadows again and stood at the glass, her eyes reflecting the clinic's lights. There was an intelligence in that gaze that seemed almost human, a mother's desperate hope for her child's survival, mixed with a fierce demand for justice. She's beautiful, Lava murmured, glancing at the mother leopard while preparing the activated charcoal solution. And incredibly brave. Most wild animals would avoid human contact at all costs, even if it meant losing their young. She chose to trust us, Wesley said softly. Or maybe she had no choice at all. This isn't just about saving the cub anymore, Wesley. Laura's voice was serious as she administered the treatment. We need to find out who's putting out this poison. If we don't stop them, more animals will die. Wesley nodded, knowing she was right. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders, not just to this cub and its mother, but to all the wildlife that called these mountains home. He thought about Scout again, but this time the memory didn't bring only pain. It brought determination. We'll need evidence, he said, already thinking ahead. Blood work, tissue samples, everything properly documented. If we're going to stop this, we need proof. Proof. Lava smiled grimly as she checked the cub's vital signs again. That's exactly what I was thinking. I've been tracking suspicious animal deaths in the area for months, but this is the first solid evidence we've had. The mother leopard might have brought us exactly what we needed to expose this. Outside, the mother leopard settled onto her haunches, her eyes never leaving her cub. Her presence was both a comfort and a challenge, a reminder that nature was trusting them to make this right. Wesley felt the familiar guilt and fear begin to fade, replaced by a steely resolve. This time would be different. This time, he wouldn't fail. The night stretched ahead of them, filled with careful monitoring and constant adjustments to treatment. But with every small improvement in the cub's condition, every steady breath and stabilizing vital sign, Wesley felt more certain. Sometimes the path to healing required facing old wounds, and maybe that's exactly what this mother leopard had brought to his door. Not just her dying cub, but a chance for redemption. While waiting for Lavra, Wesley monitored the cub's weak breathing. His mind wandered to Charles Redmond's sprawling ranch that bordered the wilderness where these leopards made their home. The thought of the wealthy rancher made his stomach tighten. He remembered their first encounter 3 years ago, when Redmond had brought in an injured horse. The man had filled the clinic's waiting room with his presence. Broad-shouldered, weather-beaten face, and eyes that held no warmth. Even in simple ranch attire, he exuded power and menace. Fix her up quick, Doc, Redmond had ordered, not asked. She's worth more than your clinic. That day, Wesley had witnessed firsthand how Redmond treated those he considered beneath him. The rancher had made several calls, barking orders about dealing with those damn predators that had spooked his prized horse. Wesley had pretended not to hear, but the memory of Redmond's cold voice lingered. The sound of tires on gravel pulled Wesley from his thoughts. Lavra hurried in, her eyes widening at the sight of the leopard cub. "Oh my God," she whispered, immediately moving to examine the animal. Outside, the mother leopard's eyes gleamed in the darkness, watching. "Poisoning," Wesley explained, showing Laura the test results. Deliberate. Laura's face hardened. "I've seen this before. Tainted meat left out for predators. It's illegal." But she trailed off, both of them knowing who was likely responsible. "Redmond," Wesley said quietly. The name hung heavy in the air. Laura nodded grimly. "His ranch hands have been spotted leaving bait. But no one dares testify. He owns half the town, Wesley. The mayor golfs at his private club. The sheriff's daughter works at his stables." Wesley ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of what they were up against. Redmond's influence stretched like a spider's web across the county. The man had fought every wildlife protection measure, claiming predators threatened his livestock. His lawyers had tied up conservation efforts in endless litigation. The clinic's phone rang, making them both jump. Wesley answered, his throat tight. The voice on the other end belonged to Tom Miller, who served on the town council and whose mortgage was held by Redmond's bank. "Wesley, heard you might have some unusual patients tonight," Tom said, his voice strained. "Listen, as a friend, some folks are concerned. Maybe best to let nature take its course, you know?" Wesley's hand tightened on the receiver. "Thanks for your concern, Tom," he replied stiffly, then hung up. Laura watched him with worried eyes. "That's how it starts," she said, the friendly warnings. "Then it gets worse." Wesley looked at the cub, remembering his German shepherd puppy all those years ago. The same helplessness, the same struggle for breath. But this time, the death would be no accident. It would be the result of calculated cruelty. "I can't." "Let it happen again," he said firmly. More calls came over the next hour. The feed store owner mentioning that his supplier, a Redmond subsidiary, might have to review their credit terms. The property manager suggesting Wesley's lease might not be renewed. Each call carried the same underlying message: mind your own business. Laura helped Wesley administer another round of treatment to the cub. "Redmond won't stop," she warned. "He hates anything that threatens his control." A few years back, a journalist tried investigating his grazing permits on protected land. Within a month, her car was vandalized, her house broken into. She left town. Wesley watched the mother leopard pacing outside, her movements reflecting his own restlessness. His clinic was already struggling. He had loans to pay, and most of his clients were connected to Redmond in some way. Fighting someone with that much power could mean losing everything he'd worked for. But looking at the poisoned cub, Wesley saw more than just an animal in need. He saw a test of character, a chance to stand against the casual cruelty that money and power made possible. The memory of his puppy's death had haunted him for decades, not just because he'd failed to save it, but because he'd felt powerless. The clinic's door chimed. Wesley turned to see Marcus Chun, Redmond's personal attorney, standing there in an expensive suit that seemed out of place in the humble waiting room. "Dr. Crane," Marcus said smoothly, "I represent Mr. Redmond's interests. He's concerned about liability issues regarding your current patient. Wild animals can be unpredictable, dangerous. It would be unfortunate if someone got hurt and tried to hold your clinic responsible." Wesley met the lawyer's practiced smile with a steady gaze. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Chun. Please tell Mr. Redmond I appreciate the warning." After the Lyra left, Lavra touched Wesley's arm. "This is just the beginning," she said softly. "Redmond won't stop until he gets his way. He never does." Wesley looked at the cub, then at its mother still maintaining her vigil outside. He thought of all the times he'd stayed quiet, played it safe, watched others bow to Redmond's will. The memory of his puppy's last whimper echoed in his mind. But this time, instead of helplessness, he felt something different: determination. Then he's about to experience something new, Wesley said quietly. Because this time, someone's going to stand up to him. Laura squeezed his hand, understanding the weight of his decision. They both knew that by choosing to save this cub, Wesley wasn't just taking on a medical challenge. He was challenging the entire power structure that Redmond had built. The rancher's quiet warnings had made the stakes clear. This was no longer just about medicine. It was about whether money and influence could continue to override decency and law. The mother leopard's eyes caught the clinic's lights, glowing like twin flames in the darkness. In her unflinching gaze, Wesley saw a reflection of his own resolve. Whatever Redmond might do, whatever pressure he might apply, Wesley knew he couldn't walk away. Not this time. The cub stirred weakly on the examination table, fighting for each breath. Wesley checked its vital signs, adjusted the foredrip, and settled in for what he knew would be a long night. Outside, Redmond's influence hung over the town like a shadow, but inside the clinic, a different power was taking hold. The power of someone who had finally found the courage to say no to corruption. The cub's labored breathing echoed through the quiet clinic as Wesley checked its vital signs for the third time that hour. His shoulders slumped as he noted the weakening pulse. The poisoning was taking a heavier toll than he'd initially feared. Through the window, he could see the mother leopard's eyes gleaming in the gathering dusk. She hadn't left her post since bringing her cub, maintaining a silent vigil that both unnerved and strengthened him. "Come on, little one," Wesley whispered, gently stroking the cub's spotted fur. "Stay with me." Laura appeared at his side, her face etched with concern. "How's our patient?" "Not good. The poison's really taking hold now." Wesley ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I need more activated charcoal and fluid supplements, but—" He gestured to his nearly empty supply cabinet. "But what?" Laura pressed, though her expression suggested she already knew. "Mountain View Supply called earlier. They're suddenly unable to fulfill my regular order." Wesley's voice carried a bitter edge. "And Valley Medical Equipment canceled my standing delivery. Said they're having inventory issues." Laura's eyes narrowed. "Redmond. Has to be. He's got his fingers in every business around here." Wesley checked the foredrip running into the cub's tiny paw. First it was just warnings through his ranch hands. Now this. "He's trying to squeeze you out," Laura said, her voice tight with anger. "Make you give up the cub." A sharp knock at the front door made them both jump. Wesley's heart hammered as he approached, remembering Redmond's not-so-subtle warnings. But it was only Mike Peterson, the local pharmacist, looking uncomfortable in the evening shadows. "Mike?" Wesley opened the door. "What brings you by?" The older man shifted his weight, not quite meeting Wesley's eyes. "Look, Doc, I hate to do this, but I can't fill your clinic's orders anymore. Nothing personal. You understand. Just business." "Business?" Wesley felt his face flush. "Mike, we've known each other for 15 years. You were at my clinic's opening." I know. Mike glanced over his shoulder as if expecting to be watched. "But times are tough, and well, certain people have influence around here. I got a family to think about." After Mike left, Wesley slumped against the counter. "That's the fourth supplier today. Laura placed a steadying hand on his arm. "Wesley, listen to me. This is exactly how Redmond operates. He can't touch you legally, so he's trying to strangle your practice slowly. Make you back down." "It's working," Wesley admitted, gesturing at his dwindling supplies. "Without basic materials, I can't treat any animals, not just the cub. My regular patients need me too." A weak mule from the treatment room drew their attention. The cub was stirring restlessly, its breathing more labored than ever. Outside, the mother leopard pressed closer to the window, her eyes reflecting desperation that matched Wesley's own. Laura stepped between Wesley and the window, forcing him to meet her gaze. "Remember why you became a vet in the first place. Not for the money or the easy life, but because you couldn't bear to see animals suffer. That little boy who lost his puppy, he wouldn't give up just because some wealthy bully made things difficult. Wesley's mind flashed back to that devastating childhood moment, his German Shepherd puppy's last whimper, the helplessness he'd felt, the memory that had driven him to become a veterinarian to prevent others from experiencing that same pain. "You're right," he said quietly, "but what can I do? Redmond's got this whole town in his pocket." "Not the whole town," Lavra countered, "and not me. I've got contacts in the wildlife community. We can get supplies from outside the area. It won't be easy, but we can keep going." The cub coughed weakly, and Wesley hurried to check its temperature. The fever was climbing again. He'd need to act fast to save it, with or without his usual resources. "We document everything," Laura continued, her voice gaining strength. "Every threat, every canceled delivery. We build a case. Redmond's not untouchable, no matter what he thinks." A commotion outside drew their attention. The mother leopard had risen to her feet, hackles raised as headlights swept across the parking lot. A large pickup truck rolled to a stop, and Wesley recognized one of Redmond's ranch hands behind the wheel. The man didn't get out, just sat there with the engine idling, a clear message in his presence. The mother leopard held her ground, her golden eyes locked on the truck in silent challenge. "Look at her," Lavra said softly. "She's not backing down, even though she's alone and outnumbered. She knows what's right, and she's standing her ground." Wesley watched the standoff, feeling something shift inside him. The leopard's unwavering dedication to her cub, despite all odds, sparked a familiar determination in his chest. He thought of all the animals who depended on his clinic, of the oath he'd taken to protect and heal. "Get me a list of your contacts," he said finally, "and we'll need documentation of the cub's condition. Blood work, photos, everything. If Redmond wants to play hardball, he'll learn he's not the only one who can fight for what matters." Lavra smiled, squeezing his arm. "Now that's the Wesley Crane I know." The truck outside revved its engine in a final act of intimidation before peeling away. The mother leopard watched it go, then settled back into her vigilant pose by the window. Her steadfast presence seemed to fill the clinic with quiet strength. Wesley turned back to his patient, administering what medicines he had left with careful precision. The cub's struggle wasn't over, and neither was his. But with Laura's help, and the inspiration of the mother leopard's unwavering devotion, he felt ready to face whatever Redmond threw at him next. "We'll need to be creative with treatments," he said, checking his inventory. "Make everything stretch until we can establish new supply lines. It won't be easy." "Nothing worth fighting forever is," Lavra replied, already making notes and calls on her phone. "But you're not in this alone." The night stretched ahead, full of challenges and uncertainty. But as Wesley worked to save the cub's life with his limited resources, he felt stronger than he had in years. Sometimes, he realized, it took facing down a bully to rediscover your own courage. Outside, the mother leopard's eyes gleamed with approval, as if she had known all along that he would make the right choice. Her faith, like Laura's, helped steady his hands as he continued his work, determined to prove that compassion could stand strong against corruption. The morning light filtered through the clinic windows as Wesley hunched over the lab results, his heart pounding. The chemical analysis from the cub's blood work was conclusive. The poison matched exactly with a restricted pesticide that Redmond Ranch used on their property. Wesley's hands trembled as he showed the papers to Lavra. "Look at these molecular markers," he said, pointing to the distinctive pattern. "This is compound 47B. It's highly regulated, and Redmond's the only rancher in 3 counties with a permit to use it." Lavra studied the results, her expression hardening. "This is it, Wesley. This is what we needed." The cub lay sleeping in its kennel, breathing easier after days of treatment. Its mother remained outside, ever vigilant, her spotted coat gleaming in the morning sun. "We should contact the wildlife authorities right away," Wesley began, reaching for his phone. But before he could dial, the clinic's front door burst open. 3 men stalked in, ranch hands Wesley recognized from Redmond's property. Their boots tracked mud across the clean floor, and their postures radiated menace. The leader, a burly man named Tucker, stepped forward. "Doc," Tucker said, his voice deceptively casual. "Heard you've been running some interesting tests lately." Wesley felt his throat tighten, but he forced himself to stand straight. "This is a private medical facility. You need to leave." Tucker's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Redmond's concerned about all these accusations flying around. Wouldn't want anything unfortunate to happen to your nice clinic here." He ran a hand along a shelf of medical supplies. "Lots of expensive equipment. Be a shame if something got broken." Lavra stepped forward, her phone visible in her hand. "I'm recording this conversation," she said calmly, "and I've already uploaded the test results to secure cloud storage." The men exchanged glances, their confidence wavering slightly. Wesley felt strength flowing into him from Laura's steady presence. "Tell Redmond I have proof his poison killed that mother's cub," Wesley said, surprised by the firmness in his voice. "And I'm done being quiet about it." Tucker's face darkened. "You're making a big mistake, Doc. This town needs Redmond's business more than it needs another bleeding heart vet." "No," Wesley replied, thinking of the dying cub, of his childhood dog, of years of swallowing his conscience. "The mistake was letting fear stop me from doing what's right." The mother leopard chose that moment to release a low growl from outside, making the men jump. Tucker tried to hide his unease with a sneer. "Last chance to drop this, Doc. Think real careful about what's good for you." But Wesley wasn't listening anymore. He was watching the leopard, seeing in her unwavering dedication the strength he'd been missing. Her eyes met his through the window, and in that moment, he knew he would not back down. "I think you should leave now," he said quietly, "and tell Redmond I'll be speaking with the authorities this afternoon." The men retreated, trying to maintain their threatening demeanor, but clearly unsettled by the leopard's presence and Wesley's newfound resolve. As the door closed behind them, Laura squeezed Wesley's shoulder. "You did it," she said softly. "You stood up to them." Wesley looked at the test results in his hand, the evidence that would finally expose Redmond's cruelty. "No," he replied. "We did it, all of us." The cub stirred in its kennel, letting out a tiny mew that its mother answered from outside. The sound filled Wesley with purpose. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, he felt ready to face whatever came next. Lavra placed her hand on Wesley's arm. "Be careful," she whispered as he moved toward the entrance. Through the clinic's windows, 3 burly men emerged from their trucks. Wesley recognized them as ranch hands from Redmond's property. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to stand tall as he stepped outside into the cool evening air. "Evening, Doc," the largest of the men said, his voice deceptively friendly. "Got a message from Mr. Redmond." Inside the clinic, the leopard cub stirred on its bed of blankets, showing the first real signs of improvement since Wesley had begun treatment. Its eyes were clearer now, and it had managed to keep down small amounts of water. The sight had filled Wesley with cautious optimism earlier that day, but now that hope felt fragile in the face of these threats. "I'm listening," Wesley said, keeping his voice steady. "Mr. Redmond wants you to understand something." The man took a step closer. "That cat you're treating? It's causing problems. Big problems. And now we hear Walker's Medical Supply won't be making deliveries anymore." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Shame about that. Must be hard running a clinic without supplies." Wesley felt his jaw tighten. Walker's had been his last reliable supplier. Without them, he'd struggle. to keep the clinic operating, let alone treat the cub. But the evidence he'd just discovered about the poison gave him strength. A low growl emerged from the darkness beyond the parking lot. The men's heads snapped toward the sound. The mother leopard's eyes caught the light, 2 gleaming points in the gathering dusk. She moved forward with fluid grace, her powerful shoulders rolling as she advanced. The men stumbled backward, reaching for their truck doors. Jesus Christ, one of them muttered. The leopard didn't charge, but her message was clear. She stood her ground, tail lashing, a force of nature that wouldn't be intimidated by human threats. "You tell Redmond something for me," Wesley said, finding courage in the leopard's presence. "Tell him I know about the poison. Tell him I can prove it's his." The men retreated to their vehicles, the largest one pointing a shaking finger at Wesley. "You're making a big mistake, Doc. There's already talk about the medical board looking into your license. Treating dangerous wild animals? That's not going to look good." The trucks roared to life and peeled out of the parking lot, gravel spraying. Wesley watched them go, his heart still racing but his resolve stronger than ever. When he returned inside, Lavra was bent over the cub, checking its vital signs. "The fever's down," she said, looking up with a smile. "And look, it's trying to eat." The cub was indeed making weak attempts at the small bits of food they'd left near its head. Its eyes, though still glazed with illness, showed a spark of life that hadn't been there before. "That's my brave little fighter," Wesley murmured, kneeling beside the makeshift bed. He gently stroked the cub's spotted fur, remembering how lifeless it had seemed just days ago. Each small improvement felt like a victory, not just over the poison but over the cruelty that had caused this suffering. Through the window, he could see the mother leopard had returned to her usual spot. She sat regally, her presence both a comfort and a reminder of what was at stake. Nature itself seemed to be taking a stand, refusing to bow to human greed and corruption. Lavra squeezed his shoulder. "We'll figure out the supplies, Wesley. There are other vendors, other ways. What matters is we're doing the right thing." Wesley nodded, watching the cub take another small bite of food. In its growing strength, he found his own. Redmond could threaten his license, cut off his supplies, try to destroy everything he'd built, but he couldn't take away the choice to stand up for what was right. The mother leopard's eyes met his through the glass, and in that moment, their shared purpose was clear. Some battles were worth fighting, no matter the cost. "Medical supplies aren't your only problem now," Lavra said, spreading documents across Wesley's desk. Her hands trembled slightly as she pointed to water quality reports. "Look at these tests. Results from the stream that runs through Redmond's property." Wesley leaned forward, his tired eyes scanning the numbers. The cub whimpered softly from its corner bed, drawing his attention momentarily before he focused back on the papers. What he saw made his blood run cold. "These toxin levels," he shook his head in disbelief. "They're off the charts." Lavra nodded grimly. "The poison Redmond's using isn't just killing predators. It's seeping into the groundwater. That stream feeds into the valley's water supply." Wesley's mind raced as he connected the dots. The Martinez family, their youngest, was in the hospital last month with mysterious symptoms. "And the Peterson kids." "Exactly," Lavra interrupted. 3 cases of unexplained illness in families living downstream from Redmond's ranch. It's not just coincidence. Wesley stood and walked to the window. The mother leopard was there as always, her eyes gleaming in the gathering dusk. Behind him, the cub made another soft sound, stronger than before. "We've got to stop him," Wesley said quietly. "But Redmond, he practically owns this county. The sheriff, the commissioners, they're all in his pocket." Lavra moved to stand beside him. "I've already contacted the EPA and State Environmental Office, but we need more proof. something concrete that ties the poison directly to Redmond. "I might have that," Wesley said. He retrieved a locked cabinet key from his desk drawer. Inside were samples he'd taken from the cub's blood work, along with soil samples from near the clinic. The chemical signature in these matches exactly with compounds found only in restricted pesticides, the kind Redmond special orders for his ranch. "That's a start," Laura said. "But exposing this means going to war with Charles Redmond. He won't just threaten to cut off supplies anymore. He'll try to destroy you completely." Wesley looked at the cub, remembering its near-lifeless state when the mother first brought it to him. Now it was showing signs of recovery, fighting for life despite everything. Something shifted in his chest, a familiar feeling of resolve. Like the day he decided to become a veterinarian after losing his childhood dog. "People's lives are at stake," he said firmly. "Children are getting sick. If we don't stop him now, how many more will suffer?" Laura squeezed his arm. "I'm with you all the way." "But Wesley," she paused, making sure she had his full attention. "This will cost us, maybe everything. I know." He gathered the reports and his samples, carefully placing them in his safe. "But some things matter more than playing it safe. That mother leopard taught me that when she trusted me with her cub." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. The mother leopard remained at her post, a silent guardian reminding Wesley of what was at stake. The truth about Redmond's actions had grown far darker than anyone suspected, and now Wesley held evidence that could bring down the powerful rancher's empire. "We'll need to move carefully," Laura said, already planning their next steps. "Document everything. Build an airtight case before we go public." Wesley nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle more firmly on his shoulders. This wasn't just about saving one leopard cub anymore. It was about protecting an entire community, both human and animal, from a man whose greed had poisoned the very ground beneath their feet. Wesley and Laura worked late into the night, organizing their evidence against Redmond. The water quality. Reports painted a damning picture. Toxic chemicals seeping into the watershed, endangering not just wildlife, but human lives. The clinic's quiet was broken only by the occasional whimper from the recovering leopard cub, and the steady hum of medical equipment died as they stepped outside for a much-needed break. The parking lot's motion lights flickered to life. 3 pickup trucks roared into view, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Wesley's heart pounded as he recognized Marcus and Jake, Redmond's most trusted men, stepping out with grim expressions. "Dr. Crane," Marcus called out, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "Mr. Redmond's getting mighty tired of your meddling." Laura stood shoulder to shoulder with Wesley, her presence steady and defiant. "We've got proof of what he's doing," she said firmly. "The poison isn't just killing wildlife anymore." Jake took a menacing step forward. "Sounds like you two are confused about how things work around here. Maybe we need to explain it better." Wesley felt the weight of the evidence in his jacket pocket. His hands were trembling, but his voice remained steady. "People are getting sick downstream. Children, families. This isn't about predators anymore." "Last chance," Marcus growled, reaching behind his back. "Hand over whatever papers you think you've got, and we forget this happened." The tension crackled in the air like electricity. Wesley's mind raced through their options. They were outnumbered, cornered against the clinic's wall. The nearest neighbor was too far to hear any calls for help. Then something changed. A deep, resonant growl cut through the night air. The mother leopard emerged from the shadows like a ghost, her massive form flowing with deadly grace. Her muscles rippled beneath her spotted coat as she positioned herself between Wesley's group and Redmond's men. Her eyes blazed with intelligence and fury. Jake stumbled backward, nearly falling. "Jesus Christ!" The leopard's tail lashed back and forth as she advanced one deliberate step at a time. Her presence seemed to fill the entire parking lot, a force of nature made flesh. Wesley watched in awe as this wild creature, who had trusted him with her cub's life, now stood as his. Protector Marcus raised his hands, backing toward his truck. "This is insane. This is completely insane." The mother leopard let out another growl. Deeper this time, the sound seeming to vibrate through the earth itself. Redmond's men broke, scrambling into their vehicles. Tires squealed against pavement. As they fled, leaving behind nothing but the acrid smell of burnt rubber and fear in the sudden quiet. The leopard turned her head to look at Wesley. Their eyes met, and in that moment, he understood something profound. This wasn't just about saving one cub or exposing one man's crimes. It was about standing up to protect all life, wild and human alike. The leopard had shown more humanity than those who would poison the earth for profit. Laura let out a shaky breath. "I think that settles whose side nature's on." The leopard maintained her vigil for several more moments before melting back into the shadows, a silent guardian ready to emerge again if needed. The message was clear. Truth and life would not be silenced by threats or intimidation. Wesley touched the evidence in his pocket, his resolve stronger than ever. The confrontation had changed something fundamental in the balance of power. Redmond's men had faced not just human opposition, but the wild itself, and they had run. The mother leopard's presence transformed the standoff. Redmond's men stumbled backward, their bravado crumbling as she stalked forward, her teeth bared in a silent snarl. In their haste to retreat, Jake dropped a manila envelope. Laura darted forward to grab it, finding inside exactly what they needed. Internal documents detailing Redmond's illegal poisoning operation. By morning, the story broke. Local news crews descended on the clinic, cameras rolling as Wesley and Laura presented their evidence. The water quality reports, combined with Redmond's own documentation, painted an undeniable picture of environmental crimes that had endangered the entire community. The poison wasn't just targeting predators, Wesley explained to reporters, his voice steady and clear. It was seeping into groundwater, affecting livestock, wildlife, and people downstream. Children were getting sick. This had to stop. State environmental officials arrived within days. They conducted thorough tests that confirmed everything Wesley and Laura had discovered. Redmond's empire began to crumble as investigators uncovered years of violations, bribes, and cover dash-ups. The rancher's arrest made headlines across Montana. As he was led away in handcuffs, his weathered face twisted with rage, Wesley thought about how fear had kept people silent for so long. But it had taken just one act of compassion, helping an injured leopard cub to bring truth into the light. Inside the clinic, the cub grew stronger each day. Its playful energy returned, filling the examination room with life and hope. The mother leopard remained a constant presence, watching through the windows as her child healed. Her trust in Wesley never wavered. Finally, after weeks of care, the day came to release them both. Wesley and Laura drove deep into the wilderness, far from ranches and human settlements. The morning air was crisp and clean as Wesley opened the transport cage. The cub bounded out, its spotted coat gleaming in the sunlight. It moved with the fluid grace of a predator now, all traces of poison gone from its system. The mother leopard emerged from the trees, and Wesley's breath caught as he watched their reunion. For a moment, the leopard's eyes met his. In them, he saw something that touched his soul. Acknowledgement, perhaps even gratitude. But there was a warning there too, a reminder that nature's power demanded respect. As he watched them disappear into the forest, Wesley felt the weight of an old burden lifting. He thought of that helpless boy he'd been, holding his dying German shepherd, believing he'd failed to save a life that trusted him. Now he understood. Sometimes redemption comes in unexpected ways. By saving this cub, he'd finally made peace with that long-ago loss, "They'll be okay," Laura said softly beside him. Wesley nodded, watching the spot where the leopards had vanished. "Yes, they will, and so will we." The legal proceedings against Redmond continued for months, resulting in heavy fines and jail time. But for Wesley, the true victory had nothing to do with courtrooms or justice systems. It lay in the courage to stand up against cruelty, in the choice to let compassion guide his actions despite fear. The clinic thrived in the aftermath, as people began bringing their animals without fear of Redmond's influence. Wesley kept a photo of the leopard cub on his desk, a reminder that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought with weapons or words, but with simple acts of kindness. Each evening, looking out over the Montana wilderness, he thought he could sometimes hear a distant leopard's call. It reminded him of the gift he'd received, the understanding that true strength comes not from power over others, but from the courage to protect those who need help, no matter the cost. If you believe stories can heal, lift, and connect us, this channel is for you. Thanks for being here. Hit subscribe, and I'll meet you again tomorrow with something real.